Welcome to the Israel Answers series, connecting Israel, the Bible, and you. Join Susan Michael as she explores timely issues and current events from a scriptural perspective to equip the Christian world with a balanced and biblical response. Be sure to subscribe for future episodes, which will ignite your faith and bring the Bible to life in your everyday world. Now, let's join Susan with your Israel Answers.
Welcome to the Out of Zion podcast. I'm Shelley Neese, filling in for Dr. Susan Michael, and today we have a special guest with us, a first-time guest, Ryan Levin. He is the executive director of the Efrat Development Foundation. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So first, Ryan, can you tell us, just to the Christian audience, our audience is primarily Christian,
Sure.
Efrat in the Bible.
Yeah.
Is it Bethlehem? Is it on the way to Bethlehem?
It's a good question.
Okay, frame it for us.
Yeah, great question. Efrat and Bethlehem are often used interchangeably in the Bible, one to refer to the other. And what adds further confusion to that is, as you said, the use of the term the way to, the way of Efrat or the way of Bethlehem. But one thing is for absolute certain, Efrat and Bethlehem, that's proximity, have a very shared biblical narrative. And that is true historically and true through till today.
What are some of those, like, biblical high points?
I
mean, we know the Christian one, that is the birthplace of Jesus, but what about other big moments?
So King David grows up and is raised, shepherding his flocks in the hills surrounding Bethlehem. The story of Ruth and Boaz, in which we read over the festival of Shavuot, happens and takes place on the outskirts of Bethlehem. And finally, Samson, battles the Philistines in the hilltop that's just adjacent to the northernmost tip of Efrat. And further south, we know that one of the Maccabean battles, the Battle of Eleazar, takes place literally on the other side of the highway. So a lot of biblical narrative and heritage in our neighborhood.
That's one thing Christians, like when Jews ask Christians, why do you support Israel? One of our answers is just that we have the same heroes, we have the same Bible, the same stories. And so it's really amazing that you get to live out in this place. So just to place modern Efrat where you live and your community, give us just where geographically is that in Israel?
So Efrat, if you're exiting Jerusalem through the southern tunnels on the way to Hebron, you'll pass Bethlehem on the left. The northern entrance to Efrat is at that same junction. Efrat geographically is spread over across 7 hilltops, standing all the way down to the Gush Etzion junction. So it's a pretty long in shape, a little too narrow, but that's the geography.
I lived in Israel during the second Intifada, and one thing I remember about Efrat was that was considered a very dangerous road, right? That it was before the wall, and it was. So can you just tell a little bit about those stories and what that experience was like before the wall?
Yeah, so we know that during the second Intifada, unfortunately, there were a lot of attacks along the 60 highway, which we like to call the Bible highway because of its placement and its significance. A lot of shooting attacks on motorists. There's a school on the outskirts of Bethlehem, actually funded by UNRWA. It's an UNRWA school, rooftop of which was used as sniper point on attacks on Efrat motorists exiting from that entrance of Efrat. And in the context of all that happening, Efrat actually took the initiative and developed a medical center in Efrat, servicing the entire region, not just Efrat, but broader Gush Etzion and surrounding areas. It is the only self-sustained medical center in the entirety of Israel. It was so novel and the need was so relevant and pressing at the time. Didn't mean that the danger wasn't there either. Doctors, we know that we employed their services to staff it at the time, were still fearful, to the extent that the mayor of Efrat at the time took a sleeping bag and camped out for about 3 weeks straight there at night, and the doctors would feel reassured that it was safe to work with. Fast track, obviously, post October 7th, and that whole need and sense of vulnerability goes to a whole nother level.
And Efrat, it's an unusual community and that there's a lot of English speakers that live there, right?
Yes.
So can you just explain how that happened in its founding, that it has become such a magnet for English-speaking
Sure.
Israelis?
I think one, at its founding, at its inception, there was an individual, Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, is an American immigrant to Israel, who was very part of the founding of Efrat at its inception. I think that created a natural sense of gravitation towards us, a certain point of familiarity. Like any immigrant, you're always drawn to a place of connection, of shared identity, of commonality, and I think that began what ultimately was a decades-long trend, and to this day known around the country as a very English immigrant-friendly landing place.
Do you know what the breakdown is?
Yeah, so about 20. I think we just did a survey. Something like 25 to 30% of Efrat residents are born outside of Israel. The vast majority are immigrants of America.
And there's this other element too, right? Is it a pretty high number of religious people as well?
Yeah, so Efrat is, for all intents and purposes, a religious community, but it's religiosity defined broadly. It doesn't have a very fixed religious ideological output, whereas other smaller communities may have, and in that sense it makes it very open and very welcoming. You can find those who identify center right, and within that gamut, feeling very comfortable at home then.
Mm-hmm. So would you define that as modern Orthodox or Orthodox?
It is a modern Orthodox. It's definitely a modern Orthodox city. Within that, there are a variety of religious affiliations, all within the Orthodox spectrum, which is what I think another element that makes Efrat so unique.
Mm-hmm. And one thing, just even in the time period leading up to October 7th, there was just all these protests about conscription for Orthodox Israelis and whether or not they were participating enough or not enough. But from what I understand from the Efrat community, it's a crazy high conscription rate.
Too high. If that could be such a thing. It's over 90%, the conscription rate.
And the reservist rate of your community is...
There were times, during the initial months post-October 7th, where you would only see women and young children around in the playground, in the streets, because it had emptied of its men of all ages. Those who are obviously serving actively in the army, but anyone from 20 plus, including fathers. Need was so critical at the time that fathers and sons could be absent from a household structure for extended periods of time in parallel one to the other. So it was very, very challenging, and that obviously had a significant impact on the social cohesion of the community. And to this day, we're still unfortunately dealing with the ramifications of that. Unfortunately, the war happened really on the back of COVID, and so it was just a perfect storm, creating heightened cases of anxiety amongst our youth, and social, a sense of social isolation and the like, eating disorders, anxiety, PTSD, and those are areas that we're asked as a foundation, supporting the municipality, are very much engaged in providing services to that.
I'm assuming. This is a narrative, this is a story that only so many people know. You weren't one of the communities that was on the Gaza border, attacked on October 7th, but you have this really high participation in the IDF. So your community suffers in this very unusual way, but it's not something many people know about. Yeah. So how did you go about providing those services for this high need that wasn't well known?
Yeah, I think it stands testament to the national identity that Efrat residents feel towards the sense of obligation and responsibility to the state and its destiny, and I think that's also a testament to the immigrants that populate the city of Efrat. We could not have done, and we still to this day could not do what we do without the generous support of our donor community. We provide the ability for us to be able to action our mission. Remain eternally grateful to that, and especially those that saw the need and got on board, whereas they previously weren't at the time, and remain to this day.
What are you seeing? What are your big projects in Efrat right now? Where are you putting most of your focus?
A lot of our focus is on a couple of big approaches in mental health space. We have a clinic that is an extension. It's a project extension of the local council, making it very unique. It's not an external provider, which is the vast majority of mental health provisional services are, which means that the needs are that much more immediate and reachable for our constituents. That's a program, a center that opened about a year ago and is already at capacity with over 400 active patients. What's so unique about that center is that it doesn't just provide therapeutic services for the patient alone, but for the entire family structure. So if we empower them with the toolkit relevant and needed in order to be part of the solutions. So it's when the anxiety attack happens in the middle of the night, and the therapist is fast asleep, they know how to handle that, and it's not overwhelming for them. We also have an anti-youth risk center, which unfortunately the need is growing exponentially. Unfortunately, we've had several suicides over the last few years of our youth. So those are I'd say our two big projects. And then in the education space, we provide we're advancing and pushing hard at the project, providing auxiliary and supplemental educational resources to all of our students. The Ministry of Education's budget allowances just doesn't meet that need, especially moving into a digital future. And one of our other big projects, and this is very, very exciting, is the Solomon's Pools Visitor Center.
Solomon's Pools part of Efrat?
Solomon's Pools should have been part of Efrat, for those who know the history. Solomon's Pools sit between Efrat and Bethlehem. They were the collection point of all of the fresh drinking water which flowed through the Judea and Samaria, through the Hebron region, through Efrat, were collected into those pools which were dug during the Hasmonean dynasty in the Second Temple time, and provided fresh drinking water to Jerusalem and to the temple specifically. Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, at the time of the drawing up of the Oslo Accords, understood the significance, very adamant they remain part of Efrat. And the military generals, when they're dividing up the maps, got that brief, found the word Solomon Pools, circled that, unbeknownst to them, that right above the word Solomon Pools were the pools themselves. And those maps got taken to the White House lawn and were signed into international law. So it's a real mistake.
Wow.
And unfortunately, those pools, which are so impressive, if anybody's been there, have fallen into a state of disrepair. There's 3 pools holding collectively some 290,000 cubic meters of water, which provide Jerusalem with over 360,000 cubic meters of drinking water, clean drinking water every year. So our project that we're putting a lot of effort into is to revitalizing, restoring the water flow, particularly through the underground aquifers that flowed into that, and to allow those of faith to come walk in the footsteps of the Bible and experience experience that for themselves.
So is there water in the pools now?
The 3 pools, one has some water, the other one is rather dry, and the third one has no water entirely.
Okay, I've only ever seen the dry ones, so I can't even picture it with water.
Yeah, it's actually very, very impressive to see. We did a tour there with a group of local residents during Scott recently. One of the pools is half full. We have videos of Jewish Israeli kids doing backflips into the water.
Wow.
It's really a moving experience. But one thing that does exist is the underground aquifers. The water flow, unfortunately, isn't as it was back in the time for various reasons, but there are certain components that are accessible, and that in itself is, you feel that you're touching the same stones that that the Israelites of old during the time of the Second Temple, they themselves dug out. So it's,
and I really see like a poetic connection to, the Hasmoneans are famous for this just like heavy pursuit of self-governance in a time that no one thought it was possible. And here's Efrat, like with its overrepresentation in the IDF. So there's definitely a poetic link there for sure.
But it's a very proud history that we see ourselves as the continuation of, and the Efrat Foundation is the vehicle driving that success.
Do you see any change with just the international communities? So Efrat is part of Judea, Samaria, what the world calls the West Bank, and there's some movement towards nationalizing these sites. And I know Efrat has always been in the conversation of like this, it will and always be part of Israel. So do you see a positive movement towards Efrat's?
I definitely see an exciting conversation around the topic. I think a lot more engagement than was previously the case. I think that's good. I don't think we should shy away from what we claim right to as a biblical heritage. I think that as Jews and Christians around the world, I think we should stand proud and asserting that, inserting that right, asserting that, that birthright. And I think, if anything, the events of October 7th really shook us out of that comfort zone, in a sense of realizing that if we're not proactive in seeking to, strengthen our connection, and our our presence at those sites, we know very well that the other side has a very vested interest in ensuring that they get left to the dust of history. And
even without the biblical significance and the modern significance of what you've done to build this community, Efrat has a very strategic importance for the protection of Israel. So can you just explain that?
Yeah. So firstly, as I said, Efrat, is very long, in its topography, and that really provides quite a solid buffer from one side to the other. Efrat also sits, for all intents and purposes, at the footsteps of Jerusalem, a new neighborhood development on the Eitam Hill, which will be, a large development project which will triple the population of Efrat. Sits literally at the border of Bethlehem, Jerusalem. So for all intents and purposes, we refer to the Gaza envelope as what should have been, the defensive barrier, in that area. We see Efrat as providing that sense of security to the holy city of Jerusalem. And so in that respect, spoke about the connection between Efrat and Bethlehem. I think, the inherent connection between Efrat and its responsibility towards defending and protecting Jerusalem speaks even louder.
And you certainly feel that when you pass it. This is a hilltop city that's looking down on everything else.
You can see Jerusalem very clearly from various parts of Efrat.
It's higher than Jerusalem.
It is higher than Jerusalem.
Not biblically, but
no.
but physically.
Geographically higher and also colder.
Yes, you get snow.
We used to get snow. Unfortunately, not so much of recent years, but in theory, we get snow.
In theory.
We definitely get the colder winds.
Ryan, it was so wonderful to have you on.
I really appreciate it.
I look forward to the day that ICJ can bring tour groups to Solomon's pools, and it's healthy, clean water that's provided. And yes, I know that your organization is going to do wonderful things for an already Zionist community.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for listening to Out of Zion.
Hey, just give me one more minute. I want to offer you one of our free resources. We have wonderful resources in our show notes. And if you go to our website at icejusa.org/show notes, you'll find links for a number of our free offers. We have downloadables to help root you in Scripture, help you to understand the issues surrounding Israel, and the importance of Christian support for Israel. And don't forget, please follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and stay connected. Thank you, and God bless.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Out of Zion with Susan Michael. Be sure to subscribe to Out of Zion now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Pray.com, Salem One Place, Salem Life Audio. Out of Zion with Susan Michael is a production of ICEJ USA. All rights reserved.